Picture this. It's exactly 6 p.m. in Jakarta. But let's say you hop on a plane, fly east for just 2 hours, boom, it's 8 p.m. Keep flying all the way to the far eastern edge of the country, now it's 9 p.m. All within one single country happening at the exact same moment. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unraveling one of the most bizarre, arguably impractical, and fiercely debated timekeeping systems on the planet, the time zone paradox of Indonesia.
To really wrap our heads around this puzzle, we first have to grasp the sheer, staggering geographic scale of the Indonesian archipelago. We're talking about a nation that stretches roughly 5,000 kilometers from west to east. To put that into perspective for a second, that's basically the distance from New York all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to London. It's wild. It's a single country spread out like an entire continent.
But here's where the mystery really kicks in. Despite covering that massive, continent-sized stretch of the globe, Indonesia squeezes its clocks into just 3 time zones. Just 3. And this compression creates this really strange reality, where the clock on your wall tells you one thing, but your body and the actual sun in the sky are telling you something entirely different.
Okay, let's dive into part 1, the geographic math problem. Let's actually look at the numbers to see why this system is so unusual.
So, as we know, time zones are determined by longitude. At the equator, the Earth rotates 360 degrees in 24 hours. That means every 15 degrees of longitude is supposed to equal exactly 1 hour of time difference, right? Well, Indonesia spans a massive 97 degrees of longitude. If you do the math, 97 divided by 15, geographically speaking, Indonesia should actually have 6 time zones. 6! But instead, it forces itself into just half of that.
And you can see right here just how unevenly those 3 time zones are sliced up. Over in the west, the WIB zone covers about 10 degrees of longitude. That's highly compressed. It's actually smaller than a standard time zone. In the middle, you have WITA covering 15 degrees, which, okay, is mathematically perfect, but look at the east. The WIT zone spans an enormous 21 degrees. It's almost 1.5 times the size of a normal time zone. And as you'll see, that bloating creates some truly wild side effects.
Which brings us to section 2, clocks versus the sun. Let's zoom in on the real-world human impact of this geographic math problem.
Because that eastern zone is stretched so far beyond its natural limits, you end up with these mind-blowing discrepancies in daylight. Say you're in the western part of the central WITA zone. Your sunrise is right around a totally normal 6 a.m. But travel over to the eastern edge of the WITA zone in Papua, and your sun could be rising at an agonizing 3:45 a.m. 3:45! That's nearly an hour-and-a-half difference in actual sunrise time, but both groups of people are forced to follow the exact same rigid regional clocks. So what does this actually mean for daily life? Well, it completely wrecks the natural human circadian rhythm. Let's walk through a typical day for a student in Papua New Guinea. The clock says school starts at 7 a.m., but geographically, it's still pitch black outside. Fast forward to 12 p.m. for lunch, and the sun is only hovering where a mid-morning sun normally sits. By the time the school bell rings at 3 p.m., outside it still feels like the late morning. You're basically waking up in darkness, working in darkness, and living completely detached from natural daylight exposure.
All right, section 3, a colonial legacy. You might be wondering, how did such an absurd system ever get put into place to begin with? For that, we have to rewind. Turns out, this 3-zone setup wasn't designed by modern Indonesia at all. It's a direct hangover from Dutch colonialism, dating way back to the 1600s. The Dutch essentially realized that juggling 6 time zones would be an absolute nightmare for their colonial administrators. So they chose administrative simplicity over geographic accuracy, setting up just 3 zones based around their own power hubs, like Jakarta. Fast forward to 1945, Indonesia gains independence, but they inherit this exact colonial clock. And today, pure administrative inertia has kept the whole thing running exactly as it was.
Which leads us to section 4, the politics of time. Because yes, time zones are heavily influenced by socio-political debates.
The real reason this system persists today essentially comes down to a numbers game. Check this out. 57% of Indonesia's population, that's over 150 million people, lives on the island of Java. And Java sits entirely within the western WIB zone. For them, the system works perfectly. The sunrise and sunset match their clocks perfectly. And since Java happens to be the political and economic powerhouse of the country, the inertia to just keep a system that works for the majority is, well, incredibly strong.
But of course, there's another side to this. From the Eastern perspective, critics argue that they're basically forced to live on Java time. Their daily clocks are wildly out of sync with nature. For a lot of folks out east, this system is seen as an unfair vestige of colonialism.
one that places a disproportionate burden on the country's periphery while just reinforcing Java's dominance. It's a really complex debate.
So, Section 5. Can it be fixed? With all this debate, let's pivot to the proposed solutions and look at why they've historically hit a brick wall. This right here perfectly illustrates why fixing this is such a logistical headache. Say you expand to 4 or 5 zones. The pro? Much better daylight alignment. The con? Unbelievably high coordination complexity. Okay, what if we compress it down to just 2 zones? Well, it's simpler, sure, but the East still suffers from extreme daylight variation. How about 1 unified zone for the whole country? Maximum simplicity, right? But the con is it would plunge the eastern regions even further into chaotic darkness. Literally, every single fix creates its own massive set of problems.
Ultimately, inertia always seems to win out, simply because the roadblocks to reform are staggering. Just think about what it takes to actually change a nation's clocks. We're talking updating every national transportation schedule, overhauling international tech systems, and bracing for massive economic disruption during the changeover. Add in the fact that there isn't really a unified political push from the East to force the issue. And finally, as government officials often point out, the current system, flaws and all, technically functions. Planes fly, trains run, business gets done.
Let's move to our final section, the global context. Because Indonesia really isn't alone in this. Let's zoom out to the global stage.
When you look at other massive countries, you quickly realize that time zones are almost always an awkward, messy compromise between geographic reality and political convenience. Look at Russia. They span 11 time zones, which creates immense coordination challenges and endless domestic debate. Then compare that to China. They span roughly the same massive chunk of longitude as Indonesia, yet they use just one single time zone for the entire country to project political unity, even if it means the sun doesn't rise until 8 a.m. in the far west.
Which brings us to this powerful little summary of the whole Indonesian paradox. The clocks show one time, the sun shows another. It's a really stark reminder that this quirk of geography isn't just about scheduling flights or meetings. It reveals the deep, underlying challenges of nation building. It shows just how hard it is to hold together an impossibly diverse archipelago where compromise is totally necessary, but absolute perfection is geographically impossible.
So, I want to leave you with this thought-provoking question to ponder. Are modern nations bound to the arbitrary clocks of their inherited past? When geography forces us to bend time to fit political borders, just how arbitrary is the construct of time itself? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll see you next time.